Women for Impact is a global initiative co-created by 15 innovation experts and change makers in order to unlock women's full potential for a better world. Now, before we start this session, I just want to remind you about our upcoming She Impacts program, which starts on November 7th. It's a 5 weeks program for female-led impact startups that want to grow and want to scale, based in the MENA region. Lema from the team is available with us today. She's here on the chat and she's sharing her email. So if you have any questions, please reach out to Lema for more information. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our esteemed panelists. So Lema, if you can stop sharing the screen, please, so that we can have the full view of, yeah, thank you so much. Okay, so we are witnessing many global challenges such as climate change, access to education, for example, unemployment, many challenges related to mental health. There's so much that we are facing these days, but we are also witnessing the importance and the trend within companies, startups, and individuals to have that there's more awareness related to creating a positive impact in the world. So how can we leverage that in order to create a better world, collectively co-creating these solutions for a better world for everyone? And therefore, we have this panel discussion today, the roundtable discussion, where we have 4 different speakers from different ecosystem enabling organizations. So first of all, I would like to introduce the speakers. Thank you so much for joining us. First, I would like to introduce Noor. Noor is the Community and Program Manager at Microsoft for Startups, Middle East and Africa. She helps entrepreneurs who are building incredible things. She has been working in the entrepreneurship ecosystem with companies such as Algebra Ventures and Magnet. Thank you, Noor, for joining us, and welcome today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. Now I would like to introduce Ara Farnazian. Ara is the CEO of Stratesis, a purpose-driven company that aims at co-creating with its partners a more inclusive and sustainable future for youth in the Middle East and Africa. He is the author of Note to Self and co-author of Future Skills 2030 report and transformational entrepreneurship case study. Thank you for joining us, Ara, and thank you for being the only male in this panel.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm feeling very honored to be here with all of you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. What we aim to achieve in the future is to have a diverse panel and to have an inclusive panel in most of our initiatives. So thank you so much. Now I would like to introduce Samar Abdel Fattah. Samar is the co-founder and CEO of DM Tech. She's an aerospace engineer and an award-winning entrepreneur motivated by sustainable development and smart cities. She founded the first team in the Middle East and Africa to work on the Hyperloop concept, and they received the Innovation Award from SpaceX Hyperloop competition. Congratulations on all of your achievements, Samar, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sahar. Thank you for the invite.
Great to have you here. And last but not least, I would like to introduce Alia Jalfar. Alia manages the Open Innovation Program in Etisalat Digital, collaborating with startups and scale-ups to bring new solutions to Etisalat using the latest technologies. She's also the host of Future Now Talks, a series of interviews featuring different experts from Etisalat on various technology trends. Thank you for joining us, Alia.
Looking forward. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Okay, so what I would like to do is I would like to first ask each speaker several questions, and then we can have a collaborative discussion together. So first, I would like to ask Ara, because you are working in the impact space. We are seeing a shift, as I said, within companies, startups, and consumers towards creating a positive impact. What motivated you to start Innovate for Good, Impact Investment Forum, and other important initiatives that you're working on?
Thank you, Sahar. To start with, I worked for many years in the corporate world, so until 2017, 18. But I was always been inspired by people who transform their own lives, and they overcome their own limits, and more importantly, the ones who could dedicate their lives to improve the lives of others. So I think the main purpose of my shift, I always wondered if I can align my economic goals with doing good. So, because I always felt that there is something missing in the loop. It doesn't mean always you work for profit, always you work for making money or building success. I always felt there is something missing. And I believe that if you do not actually align doing good to other people and improve their lives, and doing whatever you do, building profit, wealth, and whatever, that doesn't really make sense. So I think this was the main reason what it drove me. In the beginning, I actually didn't know what to do. I always been so much profit and success driven, but with time, after I joined my master's in HEC Paris, I did innovation entrepreneurship. I've been introduced to social entrepreneurship, which I fell in love with. And then I understood that this is what is missing. And because I come from the sustainability industry, I worked in it since 2006. So I think it all made sense. So this is how everything started. So I think it was more purpose than anything else. And everything started to build up over time. So this is how things moved forward.
Yeah, I think that purpose and profit should coexist. We no longer think about just profit alone. And I remember from one of the events that you've hosted, there was a statistics by one of the VCs that the startups that are focusing on creating a positive impact in the world are actually seeing more return. And that's why we are seeing now this trend towards impact investing, towards focusing more on startups that are creating a positive impact in the world.
See, the only challenge, Sahar, that exists, we will discuss this later, but now
you can mention it, yeah, for sure.
Like there is a big, I think, confusion between what a impact startup or social startup mean. People, they think that they are maybe what we call them forces for good, charity-based, they don't make money. And when I started Innovate for Good in the beginning, I have received so many rejections from many VCs in the country here. And they said, hey, we don't do charity here. I said, I'm not talking about doing charity because like impact investment is not an asset class it comes from an investment point of view, but it is a zoom. So it's a lens, they call it, investors. So which means that you can still make money, but it's a bit lower in terms of return on investment. Let's say instead of making 12 or 10, 11, you can aim for 6 and 7, but it's more sustainable and durable. And the challenge here, most of startups that they work in the field, they don't think of making money either. So this is why you see a lot of failure in this field significantly. So what happened, they start with a very good purpose. They are driven with their passion to solve problems in their societies, in the planet, you name it. And then after a year or so, they get tired and then they cannot continue. And the reason why, because they don't know how to make money. And this is their biggest problem. My saying is, the bigger the profit, the bigger the impact. Because why you need to impact 500 people spending a year of your time and not aiming to impact 5 million? The difference is a difference of mindset.
Yeah.
And the time and the education that you need. So for example, there are many ecosystem builders in here and supporters, like what Noor is doing with Roberto and all of the guys. They are enablers, they help, they do. But the problem is that everything needs to come into play when there is a proper business model that can scale. Otherwise, it doesn't work. So this is what is the main challenge that is being faced today. And by technology starting to come into play, investors are starting to be more interested.
So can I add something here? Because I think that it's really important, the point you raised about venture investment, right? Is that it's not just the VCs that are like, oh, impact, we're not interested. If they're LPs, i.e. the people who are investing in investors are only looking for financial return, the VCs are legally obliged, they have a fiduciary responsibility to maximize profit, right? So that's their reason for existence. And therefore, if you're telling them, hey, we have this company that can make you more money and this company that will make you less money, but it will be more sustainable, more long-term, more purpose-driven, actually, it would be irresponsible and almost illegal for them to go for it, because that's the way that the LP limited partner VC structure. So when we're critical of VC investment thesis philosophy, it's not looking at the full picture, which is that somebody is investing in these people, and we need to start speaking more to the LPs who, as of yet, don't really have ESG goals, environment, social governance kind of objectives. That's a fuller picture of that, because the problem is pretty dire.
That's true. Absolutely, it's spot on. But now there is a lot of pressure on LPs, especially coming from young people. We will not buy your product. That's it. I mean, see the Kit Kat campaign because they use palm oil. A guy just created in his own office a Kit Kat campaign, and the entire Kit Kat family been disturbed by, hey, we need to stop cutting palm trees to produce oil or whatever, the way they do it. And then one person could drive a change. So this change makers concept that started with Ashoka, this is something very important. This is why I drive more work with young people, because they care more about, and young people, they care to work with organizations that are purpose-driven. Nobody cares about working. There is more sentimental. And I think there is a shift. There is a global consciousness shift, I think, when it comes to purpose. People are more concerned than ever. This is what I can say.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a shift in consumer behavior, which is driving this shift as well. And younger generations are more conscious about social and environmental impact. There's an interesting statistics by the JP Morgan Impact Investing Initiative, which they say that almost $60 trillion will be transferred to millennials and women actually in the next 10 years. But 90% of women are more likely to be engaged with the impact initiatives. And also 45% of wealthy millennials, and I think assume also Gen Z, want to use their funds to help others and consider social responsibility a factor in making those investment decisions. So that shift, whether the LPs want it or not, I think it's coming. And I think that's why we're seeing there's a lot of confusion and regulations as well. We're not having the right regulations. We're not having the right system or structure to create those initiatives. But I think that it's a global thing. So we're getting there. It will take a lot of time and effort for us in order to create that positive impact. So thank you so much, Ara. That you actually answered my next question. So I was going to ask you about the insights in the MENA region. Thank you so much. So I'll
on the inside MENA region, you need to be, just because we come in here, the impact investment in our region is ridiculous. It's like 1%. I mean, we have the biggest problems in the world in our region that needs solving and needs investment when it comes to Middle East and Africa. And we have the least investment. It's only 1% according to the global investment, impact investment network. So last year, we reached close to $700 billion in impact investment, but our region lacks a lot. It's about 1%, that's it. Now, things might change in the future. I mean, there are a lot of initiatives coming up in Abu Dhabi and UAE, but it's still very, very in its early stage. I hope one day we reach 10-15%. But this is like maybe in the next 10 years we can achieve that. But there is a lot of movements, mainly in Africa, by the way, in this respect.
Yeah, we have a team. We have a global team. So we have Kelly here from South Africa, and we have a team in Latin America as well. And we see that what's happening there is way advanced in terms of impact investing, in terms of even the educational side of that. Noor, you want to say something?
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone knows, but I worked in data for a really long time and tracking venture investments. And the first problem is that what is classed as an impact investment is a venture investment in a transport technology company like Kareem, for example, which provided a huge amount of employment, fundamentally changed the way that cities move. Does that count as an impact investment? The challenge of categorizing which one is and which one isn't is kind of the root of our challenge. Because if you don't really understand, and the problem of data is that when we talk about MENA, we talk about it like it's this one place. MENA is like 17 different countries, 19 different countries, depending on who you ask, with very little incentive to data share, right? We don't have government APIs that are telling us, okay, private investment in this company was this, like Singapore or like Indonesia or like the US. It's a hard, we can proxy for sure, but it's a hard one to say only 1% of venture investment in the region is impact without really looking at the methodology of that.
And Noor, if you look at Egypt, for example, it's a completely different market and the needs and challenges are very different. And that's why we're seeing very interesting initiatives coming out of Egypt and Africa in general. So yeah, I mean, I cannot compare, for example, the challenges in the GCC countries with the challenges, whether it's in Egypt or in Lebanon or any other country. There are different challenges, different needs, and a huge market as well. So for example, in Bahrain, you're talking about less than 2 million population. So it's a very challenging thing for startups here. Unless they think global, they cannot really make an impact. Whereas in Egypt, if you solve problems for Egypt only, you can actually make an impact. So there's so much related to the definitions of what is an impact and how it's created. Yeah, thank you so much. Any other insights you want to share, Ara, about the Middle East, North Africa?
On Noor's point regarding data, now there is no a global consensus when it comes to defining how you measure impact, and this is a fundamental issue. Now, GIN and other global organizations are putting kind of framework, like there is the IRIS that impact measurement platform that they have. And certainly, I mean, companies like Kareem or any other, I mean, impact, it depends on how Kareem they see themselves. It's not about how GIN reports about people like them. Whether you are a job creator, you are an impact-driven organization, then everybody in the world is impact-driven then, all type of entities. So to your point, Noor, it is true, there is no clarity. It's a bit, and there is no asset class for impact. So they calculate it mainly from the investor's point of view. So an impact investor, when they invest, there is a certain class or certain zoom, and there is certain criteria they follow. When this is how the GIN report, I assume it has been built based on their data. And this is the only today recognized platform on a global scale when it comes on impact investment measurement. There is no other alternative. And even World Economic Forum and all global organizations, they use GIN as a reference today. Now, your point is 100% true. I don't even disagree with that. But what I'm saying is what we have today in the market. But definitely any job creator should be impact driven, especially when it comes, let's say, to our region. We expect to have, let's say, I think we are 146 million people live in our region at our age between 15 and 34. And we have around 30% rate of unemployment in our region, for example, when it comes to the MENA region. And we are the double the global average, which means we need more investment in startup, because startups are amazing new job creators. I think about 40% of any new job creators, I mean, as Noor is saying, comes mainly from startups, not from SMEs. And we're seeing a lot of the brain drain that is going from our region outside. UAE is doing amazing initiatives to attract talent to stay in here, and especially working on the coding and the tech platforms. So there is a lot of need to create more opportunity for young people in our region in here. And I believe similarly in Arab countries like in Africa, we are a hub for impact investment because we have great talent, we have great problems to solve. And I think it's about time to see more investment pouring in our region. It's been delayed for a while. What Noor was saying, what you said, I think all it's true. It's just a matter of how much we can sustain the startup to survive longer. This is the biggest challenge that I see today. This is why you see the rate of failure is growing, it's not going down when it comes on the impact side. Yeah. And our job, ourselves, is how to help them change their business models and connect them to resources, being investors or being creating ecosystem around them, etc. So it's a lot of work going on. There are a lot of great, amazing companies and people working towards the greater good. And I see we will see more and more positive news coming in our region, I think.
Yeah, I think let's hear the perspective of entrepreneurs, since we have Samar here today. Samar, what do you think? How are impact startups being perceived or defined in the MENA region? Ara mentioned a very good point that they're being seen as a philanthropic or a charitable initiative. So what do you have to say from your experience?
I don't know where to start. Actually, I agree with everything being said. I will start by saying that it's not being defined. That's the thing. And I actually agree with what Noor mentioned when it comes to categorizing impact. So what I'm going to say is going to be a little bit of personal impact, because my journey with entrepreneurship, if you want to call it this way, is very young, around 6 to 8 years. However, it started with a pure tech R&D perspective. I have an aerospace engineering background, so what I was looking forward to do is to develop systems, infrastructures, high-end technologies, and this has been the things that I was involved in, and most of my colleagues. And then there were this point where being a company based in Egypt, in Cairo, and working on high-end technologies doesn't mix and doesn't work. And unfortunately, this was the journey, because we in the region, and what I have noticed with the ecosystem around me, is that we're a very high populating country, a very high populating market. So the bigger the user base, the faster the opportunity for you to grow. And it's so easy to access the user base for, let's say, simple products, solving simple problems. And the tendency of these products to be software products is almost like 99%. So if you're planning to do something different, if it's still on a software infrastructure, but a little bit different, tackling a different, let's say, looking for an environmental impact, for example, reducing the CO2 emissions resulting from mobility or last mile logistics, which is a problem we're currently working on easily for the EU across 6 cities. And I cannot even open the topic in Cairo. So here is what's basically a sample of the challenges are perceived. So the impact is not, for me, it's hard to access what is the impact of interest even. Like Ara said, it's being defined from the investor perspective, but it's not accessible for entrepreneurs. So what type of impacts are of interest, and how to introduce the impacts we're tackling as startups? It's not really an easy way to communicate that. It's an exchanging communication. And even for us as startups, we're open to change our business models, as I said, but the value proposition has to be clear. And the more it's clear, it seems like the more it's clear, the harder it is for you to grow. And the more the unique the value is, the harder the communication is. So it seems a little bit sometimes conflicting with each other, because we're trying to work on unique values, but it's not being easily perceived. And if you're working on a higher value proposition, but less user base, it doesn't make sense, because they come from a very high population country. So it was so much easier to access. For example, currently in DMTech, we're a service-based company. So we're providing services for smart mobility. And I personally wanted to build this upon providing mobility solutions on Earth and in space, because why not? Because we can. And it's really hard to communicate that. And it was so much easier to access R&D services outside the region, the whole region, because being a local company providing R&D as a service for the regional market is not acceptable, because it seems like we have spent so much time importing R&D, importing technologies. So I don't know how to summarize all the challenges, but for me, the biggest challenge was communicating the values and the impact of interest. And getting the feedback signal is also not there, which is very important for startups, because we have a lot of uncertainties in the first, let's say, 10 years. There are a lot of uncertainties around startups, and having the investment process, or the commercialization phases, adding more uncertainties is really, really threatening. And for these uncertainties to be sort of damned, there has to be a feedback signal, which is really hard to find for R&D based or tech solutions that are addressing unique values or unique impacts. And I'm still struggling with that. So one of the projects we're currently working on is building an additional module for routing optimization, but driven by the CO2 emissions. So the current criteria for the solutions that we use are minimum time, minimum distance. So in the EU, because they are building based on the smart city infrastructure, you have the low emission and zero emission zones being implemented in implementation phase. So for that to be happen, the current solution does not address these requirements. So there has to be an additional layer that address the emissions so that the routing, for example, is defined by the zones acceptance for emissions. So we're building this additional optimization layer where the routing is being optimized based on the CO2 footprint of different vehicles. And we are already currently in the development phase, and the project got the Horizon 2020 grant. But when I tried to initiate something similar in the region, so we thought, okay, maybe we can start by communicating with the last mile logistics startup scenes and try to get them involved in such a problem, because this sooner or later would be, like, for example, the UAE is also addressing low emission zones. So maybe try to be a little bit ahead of time or on time, to be honest. So we thought of creating a report first about the impact of last mile logistics emission on Cairo. So to do that, we had to start by creating an official map for Cairo with the official zones, الأقسام الرسمية. So this didn't exist, and we had to start from there, and then building a population distribution layer, an updated population distribution layer, because of the lack of access to data and how hard it is to access the data. And then getting everyone involved into a sustainable layer of looking at the impact of the growth of another startup, let's say, domain. So no one wants to, sense the problem, because if you mention that these type of, let's say, motorbikes, because basically the growth of the delivery in the region is based on motorbikes. So what's the impact of that on the environment, on the citizen?
Can I just ask you, can we take a step back just to know about what you're doing? So maybe not everyone knows what your startup is about. Maybe you can give us an idea, a brief idea, please.
Yeah, well, we're basically a smart mobility service company. So we provide basically R&D as a service on different layers. And one of these layers is AI-based software infrastructure for different purposes. So the reason I address this specific problem is to say in conclusion that the impact here is different, is being perceived different. It's an environmental impact. Maybe it has an impact on the citizen, on the lifestyle of the people who live in the city, on their health. So even studying the impact is not as accessible as it should be. So for me as a startup to start, let's say after this study, say that we have this growth rate in the last mile delivery scene, and we expect this growth in the environmental negative impact. And based on this, we have to start working on a product that solves this problem or address this problem. And introducing this value proposition is really, really, really challenging. So this type of communication and flow when it comes to unique values is really hard for tech startups, especially if you're speaking technologies that's not being produced in the region for many reasons, basically the habit of importing specific technologies. So yeah, if speaking of the challenges, this is basically a summary of how the journey of many, many startups working in the tech domain are struggling with.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Samar, for sharing. Let's hear the perspective now of corporation. So Alia, as a woman working in tech and innovation, and you're collaborating with startups and scale-ups, what advice can you give, and what comments do you have on what has been said already?
So I'd like to add on what Ara said on the business model. So we want to support companies. We want to support different technologies to achieve different things, whether it's an opportunity or a challenge. And the key falls under sustaining that business model. So of course, it's a good thing to support as many companies as you can, but at the end of the day, if you support something that's not sustainable, you're just driving them to fall harder. So this is something that I wanted to add on what Ara said. The business model is important whenever you're trying to do something with an impact. It's a must to have it sustainable. And what we do in Etisalat Digital is we have an innovation program, open innovation program, where we collaborate with the different companies from different sizes and addressing different challenges. So the program is called Future Now Cause, and as Samar mentioned, when you said that some companies are not working in specific technologies, or they're not, let's say, catching up or on time, actually this program aims to discover those untapped technologies. So what do we do in this program is we do not, let's say, repeat something that's already been there in the company or in the market. We always try to come up with something new in different domains. And it's not just for Etisalat, because as Etisalat Digital, we serve different industries. We serve digital healthcare, we serve education, different ministries, we serve the enterprises on different verticals. So what we try to do is we try to find those companies with those innovative technologies that actually serve a need, whether it's creating an impact, solving a business need, and as well making sure it's sustainable. So during the program, what we do is we work together. So we take that company, we work with them to make sure that their business model is sustainable and the company sees growth in the market. And what I would advise to founders is, let's say if you work with big companies like Etisalat, is to make sure that you bring something new to the table, because those companies, they don't look for something that's already out there, they try to find new things. And you could use their capabilities in reaching like high growth with your specific innovation and technology and that corporation's network base. And then the second thing is, when we mentioned impact, like I have a passion for supporting brands and companies that, let's say, that have a good impact, because I care about the environment. And I think that at the end of the day, we have so many companies competing in the market, and us as humans, we would tend to favor those that actually serves our needs. So what I would advise you is sometimes in several companies, you'd find this, there are different ways of collaborating. So there are the, as Ara mentioned, the profit seeking, the business focused programs, which aims to, at the end of the day, sustain the business. And then there are as well the CSR initiatives that help companies that focus on the impact. And sometimes it's regardless of how sustainable it is or the profit side of it. So at Etisalat, actually, we do both. We do it from a CSR perspective, and then we do it from the open innovation perspective. So I'd encourage you, if you could reach out after the session, we could talk and see how we can take this forward. And yeah, that's it.
So Alia, what is the best way to approach the Future Now program? So you have a program for startups, right? Or scale-ups?
Yes. So we have the website, and on the website, we launch different challenges every now and then. So we recently launched 4 new challenges. One is on warehouse technologies for companies hoping to optimize their warehouses. Another one is on edutainment. So we want to create a platform for education and entertainment content, serving all ages, since now we've seen a boom in the digital education market. especially after the working remotely and studying remotely. And we're trying to tap on the education side. And then we have the another challenge, another future now call is on the digital health and wellness side of things. So we want to create a platform that the normal person could use. And that platform, we want to use technologies that could be linked, could be integrated with different, let's say, lifestyles. So we want to see what we could do there to improve the lifestyles in terms of health and the wellness of people. And then the fourth one was different. It's on artificial intelligence. So this is more targeted for big companies. As a big company, when I want to implement an artificial intelligence project, instead of, let's say, working on the data from the time of analyzing it, from collecting it, from creating the models. So all of the chain of artificial intelligence, the process, we want to make that faster, more integratable, more, let's say, customized for big companies to make it faster for them to implement AI in their own field, depending on their own data. So this is the last four that we launched. We have a lot others that keep coming up. And whenever we have something new, we launch it on the website and we communicate it. And of course, I always share them on LinkedIn. So you can follow me on LinkedIn and you'll be updated. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Alia. If you can share the website on the chat, that will be great, so
Sure,
people can reach out to you. Now let's move to Noor. Noor, you're also working on something similar where I think it's the Growth X program for Microsoft for Startups. Can you tell us a little bit more, and why are you focusing on linking corporations to startups?
So Microsoft for Startups in the region has two programs. One is the global program, which up until very recently was just open to B2B scale-ups. They come, they build their cloud architecture. We link them up with corporate partners within Microsoft. We help them with the building, the tech enablement stuff. And then, so with that, we are connecting our startups with Microsoft's corporate clients. And then as part of our partnership with the Abu Dhabi Investment Office, we have another partnership, which is the Growth X Accelerator. The Growth X Accelerator kind of builds on what Alia was just talking about, where we partner with, so this cohort's closed, but we had 6 or 7 corporates, including IKEA, Unilever, KPMG, Accenture. They come exactly with what Alia was talking about. They have a challenge. They're like, we would like startups to help us do X, Y, Z. And so we recruit a cohort of startups, anywhere from 2 to 5 startups per cohort, per corporate per cohort. And they come and they, over a 12-week period, these guys work together. So we have Alia as an example. It's Salud. They have this particular challenge. They need a startup that can solve that challenge from a tech perspective and from a sustainability, scalability perspective, that they're able to deploy the solution on premise or on the tenant, etc. So it's a program geared towards matching typically B2B startups that are post-product. They're post MVP, so I wouldn't call them scale-ups, but they're not very early stage startups, right? They need a solution that can work in that context. And we help these guys work together, because one of the challenges is if you don't have a team focused on working with startups, is it's actually quite challenging for corporates to cross that bridge. Your startup cycles are much quicker, are much more dynamic. Corporates historically and typically move a bit slower. An 8-week deal cycle or a 12-week deal cycle might be enough time for the startup to die 3 times, right? Because that's 3 salary cycles. It's about facilitating these 2 stakeholders working together. That's what we work on.
Great, thank you so much. And I personally, I mean, working with startups and with companies, I noticed that there is a gap. And when I talk to scale-ups, and we have a program for scaling up impact-led initiatives. So these are the main challenge that we can see is the sales cycle. It's very slow with companies. And if you have a B2B model, getting that first client is very difficult. And in order to get an investor needs you to have traction. So it's like you're trying to get that client, and then companies don't have the trust about what you're delivering. And then sometimes there's no match between what they need and what you're providing. So I think it's a great idea that you're focusing on companies, that, you're creating that link. But how can companies be more open towards working with startups? How do you convince them? I'm sure it's not an easy process.
So I can take a stab at this, but I think some of the other panelists will also have very valid opinions.
That's an open discussion for everyone.
Honestly, there are two trajectories, right? There's one where it's top-down mandate, where somebody's boss says, hey, we want to do something with innovation. Innovation is really popular. Work with startups, and then you have to translate that into actual operations. So there's a desire, but not necessarily an organization that's been built to solve that particular challenge. And there's the other route where it's kind of more integrated and it's more bottom up. But I think ultimately the major distinction between these two is that if you are building the capacity to fail into your culture, you will be more open to innovation. In the absence of that, it is very hard to get corporates to really get to wrap around, because I've worked in both, right? The pace of work is very different. The culture of work is very different. There are things you think about in a startup that you never think about in a corporate, and vice versa. If the people on the teams are not like Alia, who are switched on, understanding of what the nuance of working with a startup is, typically they're programs that are geared to fail. They look nice, but they're CSR opportunities. And I don't mean CSR in a challenging way. I mean, they're just PR opportunities. But in terms of the value and the impact, is we don't see it sustainably or scalably.
See, I like to add the point here on what Noor is saying. And to your point, Sahar, the open innovation culture, it is relevantly, let's say, not that new, but it's been applied only recently. And open innovation not necessarily is with startups. You don't always need a startup for that. You may make it internal with your own teams. But the idea, it's a top-down thing. It's a completely change management. You need a different set of management. This is why there are some organizations that their R&D and innovation, it is in a different building, because the people running the operation, I mean, see Apple, for example. Apple, they do not, their innovation building is not the same of the operational building, because most of the guys, they see the innovation coming in, they plug them in the business, and then they roll it out. And you don't have this culture available everywhere. And this is why, I mean, I have noticed that there are very, very few companies in the region here that understand the open innovation culture. Some, they understand it really to develop, because you know how business grows, right? So if this is your trend, every time you innovate until you stay on the top margin, right? So if you don't, as you can see, every couple of months, Apple launches a new phone, another company launches something new, because the people's needs are changing very fast. And this is why you need to keep innovating. But what does this mean? It means you're changing the company's mindset from a solution-based mindset into a problem-solving mindset. So problem-solution fit. What we advocate is you need to fall in love with the problem, all right? So the thing is, many people, they jump on the solution before understanding the problem well. This is why part of a program that we work with young people here, with young entrepreneurs, we spend most of the time on defining the challenge and the problem, and we make sure that they fall in love with the problem they're solving. Take, for example, the SDGs. So you have 17 SDGs. I mean, if you want to make it simple to summarize your point on the value creation part or where to start, you can take, let's say, one of the SDGs, let's say on reducing hunger. Example, reducing hunger, or talking about transforming education on SDG 4, let's say. There are entities and organizations and even companies that they focus on those, all right? So the more you understand the user, the more you understand the problem, the more you have some empathy towards the user. The thing is, we jump to the solution because our mind is not designed to spend a lot of time on the problem. We have the urge, yalla, let's make the solution in. No, this is why most ventures, they fail. And this is where I think, coming back to the organizations, some of them, they are not in contact with their users and their customers. This is where, when you build in the culture of open innovation, you bring in this problem-solving culture in, and you bring people that they understand how to connect with users and with their customers, and then you build the problems based on that. It works better. But when it's closed innovation, it's so hard to change anything because people are afraid inside. They have a bit of insecurities. They don't want to bring other suppliers or clients or whatever to bring in the open innovation culture that they have, and they are stuck. So this is where I think you find most of the issues. It's a mindset issue and an organizational issue that comes from a top down. So either the organization, it has two separate units, or the entire management is aligned, because as Noor said, the innovation cycle, like entrepreneurs and innovators, we hate bureaucracy. We cannot work in bureaucracy. I mean, it is a kind of, let's say, a block to progress. So this is why I think we're seeing more and more new companies joining in the board because there is a top-down decision on changing and advancing and accelerating innovation. I believe having more and more ecosystem builders or innovation enablers are popping up in our region in the last maybe 10 years. We have seen a lot coming on the board. And I think more and more we need from those innovation enablers. So we need, let's say, hundreds and 200s of those to make the ecosystem work, because we have so many startups. And as Noor said, imagine they have a cohort that has only 2 to 5 startups. So what do we do with the 1 million startups that are in the pipeline, or 100,000? So which means we need maybe 500 like Noor, or we need 1,000 like Noor, to make this ecosystem vibrant and working. And we need, like Alia, a lot of corporations to be available and open to accept new ideas. And we need thousands of people like Samar, it's an amazing combination here we all have. And what Sahar you're doing, you bring this ecosystem together. And there are few initiatives happening. Some of them are killing the competition. Innovation is about co-creation culture. It's not about me and everyone else should die. The idea here, we have so many innovation and ecosystems that exist, or incubators, accelerators. They don't want the others to exist. The idea is that how do you want all the startups to be served if there is only you? So we need more ecosystems. There in our region here, you have seen, like, take for example, co-working spaces. I mean, we don't have many. I mean, why people need to really go and open an office and do it? We have only some few available. So the culture so people, they go to coffee shops. See what I mean? So the idea here is to, if you want to encourage startups, if you want to encourage the ecosystem, it's a complete shift of the whole economy cycle works. It's not about one person. It's not about one enabler. It's a lot of work need to be done. I believe we are on the right track, at least from talking from UAE aspect. Egypt are doing amazing work in that. We've seen other ecosystems, let's say, taking Jordan and other parts, Morocco and Tunisia, they were doing some good job, but I think it's a bit slowing down for other reasons. We're seeing a lot of things happening in Kenya, in Nigeria, let's say. So we're seeing a lot of movement happening, but we need more investment in innovation enablers and more corporations like Etisalat to really believe that open innovation is the way forward to bring in new products to the market and solve problems that currently no one is solving.
I think these are all great points. And I think it's also, as you said earlier, it's a mindset shift in the mindset for everyone, for the startups to be solving the right problems, falling in love with the problem, not with the solution, for companies to focus on how can they collaborate and co-create, and not just have it as a PR initiative, or even not just as a CSR initiative. Now we're seeing the shift from CSR moving to CSI, corporate social innovation. So why not invest in initiatives rather than just giving charity money, invest in those initiatives and getting a return as well, and creating a positive impact in the world. So this is all a mindset shift that is going to happen. Yes, Noor?
Because so the reason that that's a challenge is it comes back to profitability, and I'm not pro profitability, I'm very pro impact. But at the end of the day, if you have one group of investors with one pot of money, and that pot of money is focused on return on financial investments, you have another pool of investors who are the kind of grant focused, charity based. In the absence of a structure that marries these two, at a kind of deep fundamental level, I think we're not going to see this change. And I don't mean to be pessimistic, but if nothing changes, nothing changes. That's why things haven't worked. And part of the challenge is that impact investments, so things that the world needs, things that make the world better, are often not profitable problems to solve, at least initially. And I'm sure Samar can attest to the fact that a lot of the investment that goes into deep tech, into R&D, into really advanced technologies, the holding period of investments like that is significantly longer than an e-commerce platform. صح? An e-commerce platform can potentially be profitable within a very short period of time. These kinds of very deep, very scalable solutions are more expensive. And in the absence of somebody willing to foot the bill in a way that's sustainable, and I'm talking about at an LP level rather than at a VC or impact investor level, you sit in this kind of weird line between, is this charity or is this for impact? صح? If it's less, it is a mindset shift for sure, but it's also a financial instrument shift.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead, Samar.
I would like to add something, because for me as a startup, my perception of what Ara just mentioned and Noor just mentioned is conducting and confusing, because if you want me to fall in love with a problem and be impact driven and spend the time studying the problem, and this is exactly why I mentioned the example I mentioned earlier about the study, and I want to spend time working on the problem and making sure what I'm delivering is sustainable as a product, as an infrastructure for a product, and at the same time as a solution to a specific problem. So if you want me to spend time on the problem, this has a cost. And at the same time, you want me to be super fast profitable, but it's not, the comparison is not valid even, because there are different solutions for different problems with different tech infrastructure. You cannot compare a simple software solution that's based basically on a web product, for example, to an AI-based engine driving different domains or industries, for example. So the profitability is not even measured fairly, because the long-term profitability of this product could be much, much higher than the short-term profitability of the one you're comparing to. So having the chance to spend some time on the problem, and I'm totally pro of what Ara said, falling in love with a problem is something I used to do that with the Hyperloop. But here's what happened, even with a brand new technology that was just being introduced to the market. And they did the same thing with it. They ran into the solution, into the commercialization of something that does not exist yet, that needs 10, 15 years of completely high R&D investment into a commercialization phase for something that does not exist yet. And this killed the chances on all the companies that were starting to work on this new technology. And it left the market with 2, 3 main players grabbing all the investment, and that's it. While technology readiness level, you can see that we are at very equal stages, but the acceleration is not equal and it's not fair. Why? Because they want to run into the solution, and the brand or the tag or the name that can help me say that I am commercializing this to grab even more investment is going to take it all. And nothing is left for the rest, even if they are at the same stage of readiness. So this is exactly what happened in my own personal experience in the Hyperloop.
Samar, there is a challenge. Sorry, Sahar. There is, I mean, you cannot compare Hyperloop with a startup. This is, I mean, I did the same mistake coming from a big corporation, trying to do things. It's totally different. I mean, today there is something is called, you know, when we say fall in love with the problem, which means the failure and the iteration phase, which is, this is why we encourage doing low fidelity prototypes, not to invest in prototypes, to have it even as a presentation, talking to people as much as possible, and then keep changing the idea until it becomes market fit in a way. The problem is people, they rush too quickly to build the prototype. and to put money there, and the cost of failure is becoming an issue. The challenge is not to fail. The problem is the cost of failure. What is it? So you can fail with $100 and you keep failing for 100 times until you reach the perfect model for the business, because you're asking customers and you keep changing the model. Or you suddenly come and you say, you know what, I did a couple of tests and now I'm going to put $50,000 to build a prototype, and then nobody buys the product because you didn't spend enough time on it. So building a business, it shouldn't be expensive in the beginning. You should spend a lot of time on, and there is the business mentality part as well, which, I mean, there is something called innovator and entrepreneur. You need to know which one you are, because an innovator is not an entrepreneur, because entrepreneur's mindset is a bit different. They don't actually innovate. They work with innovators. If you are both, it's amazing. This is like exceptional that you have an innovator or a tech person and an entrepreneur at the same time. So you need to define first, because you need someone to understand the commerce, the money side of it, how to build the business, how to talk to investors, how to market the product. All of those are skills, but this is why you need a co-founder with you. You cannot do it alone. It's impossible. Unless you are a superhuman that you can do everything. You see what I mean? And this is where we face a big issue most of the time. This is my point, Sahar and Samar.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you, Ara. No, not at all. Thank you so much. There's just one more question that I'm dying to ask, and we have 1 minute, but if you're up for it, are there any specific challenges related to female entrepreneurs in the region, or are these challenges the same for everyone? Maybe this needs another hour by itself, but feel free to jump in. Yes, Noor.
The data says that venture investors don't fund them. The ones that are, so actually we're talking about a difference of 3% to 97%. And I'm speaking specifically for the region, but this is also, Bahrain actually does significantly better than the global average with an 18% كده intake. بس مصر والسعودية والإمارات are really not thriving. And when we do fund women, they're typically in industries like beauty and luxury and hospitality. They are very rarely in financial services and in IT. So, I mean, this could take another hour, so I'll just leave.
Yeah, it is a very loaded question. Yes. Anyone else wants to mention anything?
Yes, I want to agree with the last point. I really want to emphasize on that Noor mentioned. It's really hard to perceive women founders or co-founders in the IT or the ICT domain. And also, just one more thing is the acceptance of the different timelines and the internal type of time invested in building the infrastructure for the startup is really not being so basically what Ara said, and is the problem is not with the trials or the failures. The problem is with the acceptance for the timeline that takes all of that. It's really, really hard for me.
But is that related to all female entrepreneurs? Is there anything specific?
It gets longer with the communication with female entrepreneurs. It takes more time because you put more effort to prove yourself first, and then you come to the business. So there's like, you can say, an additional step to it. So that you have to be worth the communication first, and then you start communicating the business. So it's like simply that. Yeah.
Which is also multiplied by the fact that you have a tech solution that typically takes a lot longer to commercialize.
True. And Alia, do you have anything to say? Because now we are seeing a lot of empowerment program, support programs for females. What do you expect the future to be for that, for female entrepreneurs in general?
So I'm talking not from a funding perspective, but from an empowerment perspective, just to be clear. Actually, I've been like, I came from a business background, not from a tech background, but I started working in tech when I joined Salat. And as I see around me, as I see in other companies that I'm working with, I see, compared to what I've heard before, I see more women in tech and innovation specifically. And I see that there is change. I'm not saying that we reached where we want to reach, but there is change. There is hope. And what I would want to advise, not advise, but what I would want to say is, when it comes to technology, as Samar said before, it's when a disruptive technology comes, it disrupts what was before. So sometimes we think that we would have to catch up with everything that was there before, but actually no, it's like you can focus on the new technologies of today, invest in, as Ara said, fall in love with the problem, focus on one thing, be good at it, and then we could do as anyone else could do. Like we can use modern technology, focus on it, learn it. There's so many initiatives now teaching technology to normal people who don't have any technological background. I came from a business background, but as I've been working with startups, with different companies in emerging technologies, not just the basic IT. I've jumped from business immediately to understanding blockchain, understanding AI, machine learning, and all of the different technologies. I was sometimes confused to be the technical support or the technical person in the room, even though I was not. So I saw that I got empowered, and I keep getting empowered, and I see other women getting empowered as I go through different programs, different collaboration programs, different government initiatives. And I think that we're going into the right direction from the empowerment phase, and hopefully as well from a financial perspective and investing perspective soon.
Thank you so much, Alia. I think this is a nice way to end it. I think there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of work to be done for female entrepreneurs, for impact entrepreneurs. But I'm very happy to have this discussion today. It was very engaging. I hope I can see like we still have 20 people in the room or 19 people in the room. So that means it's a really, really interesting discussion. Thank you everyone so much. Thank you, Alia. Thank you, Ara. Thank you, Samar. Thank you, Noor. And thank you to everyone that was here. So we hope to stay in touch and have a nice, lovely day. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.